Hello and welcome to Pandemic Podcast for Educators. My name's Gawain.
I'm Karen.
And I'm America.
If you're watching for the first time, please do subscribe via the button down below. This week we're going to be talking about the NEU conference, which has just taken place, amongst other things. So this Saturday had the first NEU online conference. It was a special conference of the union with, I think, around 700 delegates attending entirely online. We think possibly the first time a union has held an entire democratic conference organised online. What were the key issues? What were people talking about?
Assessment is my favourite thing to talk about within the union. There was a really good motion, went to conference, which was about building a fair education system after COVID-19. And talked about the A-level and GCSE fiasco this summer. And it also mentioned about how SATs are inappropriate, particularly in light of current circumstances. You were both there. You can help me out on this.
Yeah, go on. So there have been major issues, haven't there?
Come on.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen that the whole, the craziness over A-level results, which luckily they then switched before the GCSEs, but also the government now claiming that apparently, although our schools are opening and closing left, right and centre, there's no stability whatsoever. But apparently this year SATs are going to carry on as normal and be used to measure schools in just the same way. Because, of course, it's totally fair to measure a school that's had 8 weeks of closure versus a school that's had 2 weeks of closure, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not fair at all. There's no way that we can allow that sort of thing to continue this year. It's not fair on the children, certainly, and it's not fair on the staff who'll be put through goodness knows what sort of accountability measures should it go ahead. Non-comparable, yeah, it shouldn't be happening. I mean, SATs really shouldn't be happening anyway.
Well, this is a point I think was made in a very impassioned speech by Jess Edwards, I think, second in the motion, that actually, they're inappropriate at the best of times. It's not just now with this current crisis. It's a broken assessment system. It doesn't measure what our children are capable of, and it's not of use. I mean, are they used in secondary schools, SATs results, Karen?
My experience is that they go into the data sheet and they stay in the data sheet, and we generally do our own assessments at the start of year 7 to work out where our pupils are at anyway. I also find that there are a lot of issues when you're looking at predicted and target grades based on SATs as well, particularly some of the linear progress that we have a tendency to like so much in secondary school. It doesn't really add up.
Basically a stick for beating schools and educators with, but no actual use for children's learning. So, that's the reason why groups like More Than a Score and others have been campaigning on this, isn't it? And if people want to take action over assessment, help call for an end to SATs and primary testing this academic year and going forward.
It's not just primary testing. Well, it's not just SATs. It's primary testing as a whole, isn't it? Because there's not just year 2 and year 6 who are tested to within an inch of their life. It's actually most of primary schools.
Oh, you got the phonics test in year 1. You've got, my big bugbear, the times tables test in year 4, which is so undermining of deep learning in maths. Brilliant to know your times tables, but when you tell children that basically the first major assessment you have in Key Stage 2 on maths is all going to be about whether you can remember your times tables under time pressure, you're giving them such the wrong idea of what maths is.
It's not your first one, because you're forgetting one that they've postponed for a little while, apart from those who did the pilot of it, which is baseline for 4-year-olds.
Yeah. I meant your first test in Key Stage 2. Of course, okay. Before that, you've got baseline, you've got the Key Stage 1 SATs. There are so many tests in primary now, it's almost impossible to move with them. So that assessment was a major issue. Karen, what were the big issues for you coming out of the conference? What particularly engaged you?
Besides from a lot of the COVID safety stuff, which we'll be looking at constantly throughout these episodes anyway, I quite liked there was a lot of good equality stuff as well. So there was a look at gender equality and the pay gap within schools. there was a look at restructuring as well, and this is something I'm looking at the moment with some schools in my area. Is the impact of on, in particular, women on certain restructuring. So, for instance, there's a school in my area that has decided that their new TLR roles will not be accessible to people who work part-time, which of course, due to caring duties, are more likely to be women. There was also some really good stuff on black, as in the NEU term of various ethnic groups, about looking into the centre assessed grades and GCSEs, and looking at the impact on certain groups between predicted grades and their actual grades. There was also some stuff on disabled as well, disabled students, and that impact as well.
So massively important there, particularly the stuff about assessment, because of course we've been fighting for teacher assessment to replace all of this exam factory testing in schools. But we do know, unfortunately, that there is an awful lot of evidence that shows that there's still an incredible amount of racial bias in all of the testing systems we're using, including teacher assessment. So some proper investigation into that to come up with systems of moderation which start to tackle that racial bias in the testing system, whether that's teacher assessment, whether that's exams, or whether it's any other systems of assessment, is going to be massively important, because at the end of the day, people are not going to have faith in teacher assessment until it can be shown that moderation systems are able to eradicate that racial bias, and you know, that we're no longer failing a generation of black students who are under predicted and then under supported within the system. Interesting what you say about the gender pay gap as well, because another major issue for our members, 76% of NEU members are women, and the vast majority of primary teachers are women, and yet when you look at promotion, when you look at those in headships, when you look at representation and pay throughout the system, there's still this huge gap, isn't there? So an incredible amount of work again to be done there. I'm really glad the union's taken on these issues. Anything you want to add on those, either of you?
Not on those, but I would like you, my particular favourite was your speech. So if you want to talk about your speech and what you said, I'll give you the benefit of talking about what you talked about earlier.
At like the same length of time as you had for your speech. So, in a bridged version.
I won't go on a full rant again, but for me, one of the really, really important bits at the conference was the fact that we now have policy to launch what I think are two major campaigns. One is around fair pay for supply teachers, because for far too long, we've had supply teachers going into schools, being completely ripped off by agency. I mean, we talked about this on previous episodes. Schools are paying more to get supply teachers via agencies than the actual wage, and yet the supply teachers are being paid less. They're paid on a daily rate, which is well below what they should earn for the grade they are. I mean, it's just unacceptable. I mean, it's a really challenging job, isn't it, to come into a different school, a different class, to be prepared to be able to support that class in their learning, and then to be paid a fraction of what you deserve as a teacher is just not on. And it is the agencies in this case, isn't it, that is a rip-off. So I think the fact the NEU has now launched a campaign both to tackle this, for supply teachers to be paid the proper wage, whether that's main scale or upper pay scale that they deserve by experience, and to bring supply back into local authority pools, proper access to pension pots, to sick pay, to all the rest of it, I think massively important. So that was one thing, yeah, I definitely cared very passionately about. And the other was in the same amendment, we've now passed policy, which I'm really, really pleased about, for a proper campaign against term time only contract support staff. I mean, Coram, you've some experience of this, haven't you?
Yeah, as one of the few support staff members currently on our executive, it's something that we've fought for many years. Having come from ATL previously, I remember the several years of the battles of the Durham TAs, which do have they had full-time contracts, and when the Durham Council decided to change their contracts. They had rolling strikes for a considerable amount of time to fight for that, because the gap is about 23% in wages. If they were to put back onto their term time only contract, yeah, they do between 23 and 26% of their income.
They wanted to fire them
sorry,
and then
America.
rehire them.
Sorry, America, I missed that. Go on.
Sorry, they wanted to fire them and rehire them essentially on New Year's Eve.
Yeah, an awful way of breaking contracts, firing and rehiring. And that massive loss, I mean, I think it's disgraceful these contracts are allowed. I don't know what they expect people to do. People who go into the education system, support our children, absolutely vital part of what goes on in schools and colleges. And yet what they're supposed to do, you know, get a different job during the holidays, have half-term jobs. I don't understand. If someone is dedicating their life, their career to supporting children's learning and education, the least they deserve is to be paid a proper wage. And for far too long, our support staff have been treated like second-class citizens. So time that the government stepped up and paid them properly. Yeah.
The one thing, the wages are so uncompetitive, particularly in my area, the southeast, where I live, that actually schools, several schools in our area have recently advertised for teaching assistants and had no applicants.
Yeah.
Considering that the Tesco's down the road had 100 applicants for shelf stacking, because we're in the middle of a recession caused by COVID, so there's lots of people, there's 1 million extra unemployed people, and we still can't get applicants for support staff jobs because people can't live on the wages.
Yeah, and that is outrageous, and that's not to devalue shelf stacking, as we've all seen during COVID. You know, actually, the people that keep our shops going so that people can get food and so on are absolutely essential workers, as we've seen during this crisis. But the fact that we can't recruit people to educate future generations is a disgrace, and it's a disgrace that's down to chronic low pay for support staff. So I'm really glad the union's taken that on and is going to mount a proper campaign to end term time only contracts, and hopefully we'll be able to find alliances with other unions representing support staff on that issue as well. But it's not just the NEU conference that's taken place this week, is it? We've had some other major events. So first of all, we've had the RSE guidance that's come out from the government. And if I'm reading this right, it goes not just a little beyond its remit, but way beyond its remit. If you were to encapsulate it, I believe the RSE guidance now says that we shouldn't be taking relationship advice from anti-capitalists. Yeah. Oh, I like it. You've got your little Ms. Revolutionary Socialist
allowed to do RSE
poster there. But seriously, yeah, seriously, basically this new guidance sneaked in under the RSE guidance basically says schools shouldn't be using resources from any organisation which believes there's an alternative to the capitalist economic system, from any organisation which promotes victim narratives. Now, goodness knows what they mean by victim narratives. Well, I have some idea what they might mean. I wouldn't describe them as victim narratives, but presumably they're referring to the Black Lives Movement, which has drawn attention to massive inequality in our society now that is systemic and has this huge history, a history of colonialism, of oppression, and we're not allowed to talk about it in schools now. What's your take on this?
Oh, I was going to leave it for America, but my personal opinion is that in theory, after seeing some clarification, is that it's non-statutory. So I get the feeling that this is literally like red meat for right-wing rags in the press. That this is all playing into culture wars, and it's there as like, it's more of a symbol than something that's actually going to be enforced. At least like that. At least that's what I hope.
It is. I've heard that it's non-statutory, but surely, I mean, it's a disgrace that this advice could even be put out in the first place. Our education system is supposed to be non-party political, non-partisan, and yet we're getting this guidance which clearly enforces the political views of the Secretary of State. Essentially, we're being told in schools, you must teach politics which agrees with the views of our current Secretary of State, and nothing else is allowed. I mean, that's politically partisan, right? It shouldn't be allowed. Whether it's statutory or non-statutory, it's a disgrace, right?
It'll make the theology curriculum interesting, given that this whole module's about Marxism.
Yeah, no, I mean it's completely off the scale, but there's to be a legal challenge. I hear the Black Educators Alliance and the Coalition of Anti-Racist Educators, two organisations have announced they're going to be taking the government to court over this, and I think are seeking support for that. So I guess watch this space, but we're yeah, hopefully it will be seriously tackled because something needs to be done. And we've had a bit of positive news this week. Yeah.
There's a website.
So the launch of, and this is quite long awaited, isn't it? A major website which allows you to check the COVID rates in the neighbourhood of your school, wherever you are across England. I think, if I'm right, the figures aren't published for Wales, not because the union didn't want to, but because the government doesn't publish figures in the same format. But now if you're anywhere in England, you can locate your school, find out what the local COVID rates are. So, America, am I right that you've had a bit of a go at this? Yeah?
And I was going to do some screen sharing, Graham, but you won't let me.
I've just let you now, so go for it. What have you found while searching your local area?
So this is my local area. It's currently on one of our local secondary schools. And you can have a little look around in your local area. So I'm around here.
Right, and you're able to search by school or postcode in this,
and
this website, aren't you? Yeah.
Click on each little marker is a different school. Shout out to all these schools.
Go on, pick us a school at random and let's see what information it gives us.
So if you click on that, it tells you your area's watch list status. So in Stockton, we are in enhanced support. I'm yet to figure out what that means, to be quite honest with you.
There's a little eye next to it. I wonder if we can click and see what enhanced support means, because I think there's a lot of information on this. A high level of COVID infection, and so National Public Health England team are providing additional support. Okay.
Goodness knows what that actually looks like, because it's still nigh on impossible to get a test nearby. So that's a rant for another day. It tells you the COVID rate around that school.
Yeah.
Which gone up. Not good. The data is updated weekly. And then the bit which I find quite interesting is there's a section here for parents, teachers and staff, so that you can read the guidance. And there's also a link to email your MP. So let's have a look at that.
Oh, excellent. So not only can you get clear guidance on what to do depending on your situation in your local area, but with one click there, you can immediately email MPs, put pressure on those in charge to deal with immediate issues, which I can see from this, and it reflects what we're hearing from everybody at the moment. We need tests. Tests need to be available, and we need investment. Nightingale classrooms, a plan B for learning. We need proper investment in education so that we can keep schools safe and communities safe, right?
Absolutely, and all of which has been backed up by our conference motions this weekend, actually. So it ties in lovely with our things. So we've got a section there to email your MP. So if I was to click on that, it would pop off to Matt Vickers. And then the guidance looks like this, which is quite good. It gives you links to government and NHS, and it's a pretty good FAQ. So I highly recommend people check that out if they can at schoolcovidmap.org.uk.
Right, so schoolcovidmap.org.uk, you can check the situation in your local area, check it out for your local school. It offers you advice on what to do about it, but it also allows you to take action, put pressure on MPs to sort this situation out, because frankly, it's a mess, isn't it? It's an absolute mess. It needs sorting out. We need tests available. We need investment in education. We need the government to do its job and keep people safe.
Yep, in a nutshell. Yep.
So massively important that people check out that website. Any final words for today then?
My one final takeaway is that this weekend the World Health Organization also has come out with a statement recommending that all children above the age of 12 wear masks in the classroom. So I will assume we will be working on that over the next couple of days within the union.
Well, this is going to put real pressure, isn't it, on the government to actually sort out the mask situation now that that advice is clear from the World Health Organization. America, any final takeaways from you?
get on that website, email your MP, get in touch with your local branch about it. I say that every week, should be standard by now.
But that's the
aside from
key now, that website's available, isn't it? Get on the website, email your MP, testing now, investment now, and let's sort out this mess.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Don't forget to subscribe if you want to keep up with our latest episodes, and we'll see you next week. Bye.